Hello and welcome to the Learn How to See Better podcast, the only podcast out there known to actually improve your vision the longer you listen. This is your host, Drew Davis, and I'm glad you've joined me here today. I can't wait to share some great information with you about how to improve your health, wealth, and relationships. So let's get right down to it, shall we? Hey everyone, this is Drew and welcome back to the Learn How to See Better podcast. And in today's episode, we're going to learn a little bit about how you can learn how to see better. And to be able to best explain what this process is, because today I want to take you through a little bit of an outline of it. I think it's important to kind of go back to the beginning of where we all start as it pertains to sight, eyesight, vision. And we're all born into the world the same way, right? And, butt naked, scared, and alone. And, you think about what it's like as a baby. We don't even have memories of what life is like in the very beginning, and how this pertains to all species, right? I mean, even a baby lion, I've heard, it goes for roughly 2-3 weeks of its first experience of life without sight at all. I mean, I'm a father of a young child right now, and I'm going through just, that phase where they're looking right into your eyes, but they don't really see you. They don't know you. There's no recognition. And even a young baby only sees shapes at first. And you start to think about some of the old science classes you learned about with the rods and the cones in the eyes. And I think, seeing black and white and distinguishing color. And it's that they have to go through a process of learning how to see, period, let alone learn how to see better. But either one of these examples is simply demonstrating a process of development, actually learning how to see better. And when you really think about it, the level to which our vision can actually be enhanced truly is amazing. I mean, take a look at wildlife, take a look at Mother Nature and what goes on. With animals, right? Out in the wild, there's certain birds, I don't know if they're desert hawks or some kind of, animal out there that, flies around and spots prey. They can, in some cases spot a prey a couple of miles away with that expert ability to see, right? Because it's driven by survival. So you think about the scenario where, birds flying around over the desert, maybe it's a vulture, some other type of bird that basically is used to flying around and trying to make their meal, and they need to have that excellent vision to keep them alive, right? So with that expert ability to see, some of these animals are extremely effective at basically meeting the needs that they have, and achieving their primary goal again, which is survival. And animals that are driven by survival have an amazing ability to perform when needed. You take some of these birds that can go out and spot a prey a couple miles away. You equip them with the right tools, a beak and some talons. All of a sudden, some of these animals can take down a predator, twice its size. So you think about the power behind a strong ability to see, and you realize that there's a magnitude effect that can be built upon as far as the results that you want to see in your own life. And in the event you want to say, hey, this is really, this is for the birds, I'd probably chuckle a little bit and say, nice time and pretty witty response. But, how does this apply or relate to the main topic at hand today is when it comes to the topic of actually learning how to see better, the way that we go about it, I think is going to be different by individual, because in my mind, it's broken out into multiple categories, specifically 5 categories. I look at it sort of like this, and I'll just kind of break them down at a high level and go into them a little bit deeper one by one. And maybe in a future episode, we could really do a deep dive to try and give some better examples and show how you can start learning how to see better in one particular area and build upon it and then scale out to the rest of these 5. So naming them off one by one, they would be vision, which is kind of the big picture of it all. Number 2 is reflection, and I'll refer to that as external sight. Introspection, which is more of an internal type of ability to see better. redirection, which is changing your point of view or change of perspective. That's where you're really unlearning something and resetting uh, that base knowledge point. And last but not least is expansion, and that's new learning. And so when you look at these one by one, you say, okay, how are they related? And in some instances, it might not seem that they're all that related out of the gate, but they do play their own unique part because your vision is really tied to the big picture. How are you seeing or creating the overall structure or step or setup for your life? When I think back to my own scenario, a lot of my vision about life had to do with how my setup was set up. I graduated kindergarten most likely to succeed before I even knew the definition of the word success. But it seemed to be, one of those coveted things that the other kids would look up to me for. So I would start to create a vision of my life at a young age that had to do with success because that was thrust in front of me. And so, in that regard, I'd say I was slightly advantaged as a youth to have positive outlook on your future ability and what your future results would be, as opposed to be most likely to flunk out. I can imagine how some of those high school rankings, most funniest, most likely to be a business person, most likely end up in jail, right? Those confines that can be placed upon us are ones that we want to make sure that we're observant of and cognizant to recognize, because that's not how we want to develop the vision for our life in the big picture. We want to be the ones to shape that, not have it thrust upon us and feel as though our vision has to be something where we live up to someone else's expectation of us. But more on that a little later. Reflection. Now, this, I kind of label it as external because this is where we go and review the events and experiences in our world. You kind of run the tapes of the day. What happened? Who did I see? Where did I go? What did I do? Who did I talk to? Those are the sorts of things that you kind of say, all right, well, if I run the tapes of the day, I realize that I had a certain type of experience over and over and over. How am I able to process that information? What is that feedback telling me, right? If I find that 10 people I interacted with all seem to have a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth about the conversation they had about me, well, guess what? I can probably take that feedback and say, well, maybe it's something I said, right? As we develop our own awareness. So reflection is very important because to think is to reflect, and to reflect is to think in a lot of ways, because we have to take the experiences that we have each and every day and process those and apply meaning to them. And some of this happens a lot subconsciously when we sleep. We don't even really know it. When we get into those deeper stages of sleep, your brain's just kind of going through what it all means and equating it to something. And that's why we feel certain ways when we wake up in the morning, because our brain might be processing the day's events. And you might not have had such a great day, and that could be an influence on how the next day begins. But reflection and learning how to reflect is a key component to improving your overall ability to see better. Now, introspection is one that's not quite as popular, but I separate it from reflection a little bit because I think it's internal. I view this as the ability to kind of look within yourself, to look within oneself for the answers, and get the answers to some of those unknown questions that have circled in your life. This is, the soul searching and the meditation. I see meditation a little bit as different from reflection. Reflection is just kind of look back at what happened. It's a sequence of events, whereas meditation, you're going deeper. You're trying to understand, okay, why did I behave this way in this situation? How come when, that person cut me off on the freeway, I chased them down for 2 blocks, shaking a finger at them, right? Introspection and trying to understand certain behavioral patterns. Say, what's behind that? What's really driving this set of scenarios in my life? And in many cases, this starts to point to the cycles that we see, the unfulfilled patterns and maybe relationships. This is why all your, boyfriend, girlfriend relationships, end up in nasty breakups because you have this element of your character that you didn't realize. And sometimes it takes introspection to really look within yourself and understand your own personality traits, your own behavioral tendencies, so that you can look to make subtle corrections to those daily actions and the way that you respond to certain stimuli. Now, the last two, redirection, is pretty powerful because the unlearning is one of the most difficult elements, trying to actually change your perspective, because that's what's going to allow you to actually see the world through different eyes, through different perceptional filters. And if we're not willing to unlearn, we will make very limited progress in our ability to see better. It requires a change of perspective. It requires a different point of view to be reset. And a lot of times you'll see when someone has that, that epiphany where they say, gosh, I never looked at it that way before. I never saw it through, those lenses. And unlearning is one of the most critical components when you recognize, or when you raise the awareness that you've maybe been lucky enough to have a lot of stinking thinking installed in your personal operating system. And so if you can identify this early and tie thinking patterns back to certain results, it makes it a lot simpler, maybe not easier, but it makes it a lot more simple process to tie thinking patterns to results that you always get. And that's going to be important for many, many people, is to unlearn, because we all have something that we've been taught or grown to believe is true as we've developed as people. And then you find that certain exposures and certain experiences to life challenge that. And we might blindly go through that experience, say, oh, well, that's just, whatever it is, some reason, insert excuse here. But once you start to unlearn and you recognize that, wow, I think I've been actually looking at the world through incorrect viewpoint, and in all reality, I have some sacred cows that need to be put down. And last but not least, what comes on the heels of that is expansion. This is new learning. It's kind of like once you dump the junk out of your brain, out of your glass of, or your container of thoughts, once you begin expansion, this is when you really start to stretch and expand the mind's ability to see based on widening the field of view. Once you start to impart new ideas and implant new ideas and install new programs in your operating system, all of a sudden you're able to unlock new capabilities, new perspectives, new ways of doing things and thinking about things. And it just becomes so, so powerful that you really start to make ground up. Because, what I found is that while you're busy wrestling with the concept of unlearning something, you're wasting time. You're not able to learn anything new, because the new learning in many ways is not just different than the things you've known in the past. They're actually opposites. So you have to deinstall this program before you install the next program. Even when you think of computers, a lot of times it's like, well, you can't run both those programs at the same time, or it's going to cause some sort of conflict. So you got to get rid of one and get rid of that way of doing things to apply this new way of doing things that's actually going to begin to serve you. And so there are several areas in personal development that have to do with enhancing your vision, learning how to reflect, asking yourself deeper questions, and going through the process of introspection, having a way that you can start redirection and unlearning, and then finally, last but not least, be able to expand and start new learning that's gonna fulfill you, that's gonna populate your brain with fresh new ideas and ways of thinking that will allow you to level up in life, as opposed to being constantly constricted from the old ways of thinking and doing things that have not served you in the past and will continue to not serve you if you don't take massive action to make a change. So I thought it would be good to at least outline these 5 areas. I think they're probably the 5 major components to learning how to see better that are worthwhile to perhaps explore at a deeper level. And I think what we'll do is save that for a future podcast, because I really want to drive some of these points home, and maybe we'll do them as a series over the next 5 episodes, or maybe we'll just kind of mix it up a little bit to keep some variation there for the audience. But give me your feedback if you're feeling a certain way about it, and you want to do a deep dive. Let's go deep. If you want to maybe mix it up and kind of tackle these or explore some other concepts, be certain to share that request. I want to be able to make sure that this podcast is really hitting the spot. But vision, reflection, introspection, redirection, and expansion. 5 ways you can learn how to see better. Things for us to talk about and explore a little bit further on a future podcast. But in the meantime, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. And hopefully you've had a little nugget of wisdom dropped upon you today as you start to look at ways that you can start learning how to see better. Understand that it's going to take some time. It's a process, not an event, but it requires effort. But it's nothing that's manual labor involved. It's a process of using your brain and taking the information that you see on a regular basis and processing it differently, because that's what's going to help enhance your vision. Once you learn how to reflect and ask yourself the deeper questions and go deep internally, you are going to start to question and even challenge and flat out rebuke, in many cases, the concepts and thoughts and theories that you've been installed with. And at that point, you can be able to truly expand, spread your wings to their full width, and finally fly. So with that, thank you all for listening today, and I can't wait to catch you on a future episode. Until then, and until next time, take care and keep learning how to see better. Bye-bye. Well, all right. That was some great content, wasn't it? Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you liked it. This is your host, Drew Davis, and I want to thank you for listening to the Learn How to See Better podcast today. And don't forget to subscribe and tune in for future episodes, and be sure to share with a friend if you are enjoying this content. Thanks, and see you next time.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.